Okay, so I know a lot of you out there listening are thinking about learning German. Um, Maybe you've got that big trip to Oktoberfest coming up, or maybe you're thinking about maybe switching careers.
Yeah, it seems like German is having a bit of a moment right now.
Right. It's everywhere. And so we wanted to like really get into it on the show today.
Yeah.
And I think we have some really interesting stuff to pull out from this podcast that we're looking at.
Yeah, I think some of the stuff they mentioned is not what people would expect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the podcast is called Why Learn German? The Benefits of Learning the German Language. Really rolls right off the tongue.
Sketchy. Great.
And but they had some good points, and I think that we should get into some of that.
Definitely.
So right off the bat, they're talking about careers and jobs.
Yeah, there's a go right for the practical stuff, which, honestly, I think is smart because that's what a lot of people are thinking about these days, right? Like, how can learning a language help me get ahead?
Exactly, and I think especially with German, it's like not maybe the most obvious connection for people. I mean, I don't know.
Right. I think people might think like, oh, if I want to work internationally, I should learn Spanish or Mandarin.
Right, or like if you're in tech, you should learn like Python.
Languages. Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
But they made a really good point about Germany's economy. Like they're a powerhouse, especially in certain industries.
Right. And I think the one that stood out to me was renewable energy. Like, they're really a global leader in that sector. And that's only going to get more important, with climate change and everything.
Totally. And I think what's cool is that, like, if you think about it, it makes sense that they need people who speak German to, like, work in those companies and stuff, right?
Absolutely. Like, if you're an engineer or a project manager or even in research and development for these companies, knowing German can give you a serious edge.
For sure. And they even had some numbers to back that up. Like, they were talking about studies that showed that people who speak German can earn up to 15% more.
15%. That's a lot. Yeah, it's not just like a little bonus either.
Not at all. And, it's not just about like solar panels and wind turbines either. They talked about how Germany is like a huge player in manufacturing and engineering in general.
Right. They're home to some of the biggest companies in the world, like Siemens, Bosch, Daimler, Volkswagen. The list goes on.
Yeah, like so many companies that people interact with every day without even realizing it.
It's true. And, for those companies, if you're looking to work in management or in a more technical role, speaking German is often like a requirement or at least highly preferred.
Okay, so if you're out there thinking like, oh, I want to like move up in the world, like learn German.
It's not a bad strategy at all, especially if you're interested in those fields.
Okay, so then they moved on to education. And this is where things got really interesting.
Okay, tell me more.
Okay, so they start talking about how Germany has some of the best universities in the world, like ranked really highly.
Yeah, that's not really news, though. Like, everyone knows that German universities have a great reputation.
True. But here's the thing. They mentioned that a lot of these universities offer free tuition.
Wait, free? Like,
Yeah.
totally free?
Yeah, well, almost like obviously there might be some small fees and stuff, but basically,
Yeah. How is that even possible? Like, how do they fund these universities?
it's a good question. And they explained that it's because a lot of German universities are publicly funded, so they don't need to rely so heavily on tuition.
That's amazing. So, like, someone could literally go get a degree from, like, Heidelberg or one of these top schools without going into debt.
It's pretty incredible, right? I mean, obviously, you still have to meet the admission requirements, and being able to speak German is usually one of them.
Of course, but still, the fact that it's even an option is amazing.
Right, like imagine, like, living in Berlin as a student. Like, how cool would that be?
Yeah, or like Heidelberg, that's like straight out of a fairy tale.
And then on top of all that, you're getting this, like, world-class education.
Yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer if you can swing it.
Okay, so moving on, they talk about travel, which is something I think a lot of people connect with German, right? Like, who doesn't want to, like, backpack to the Alps or visit those Christmas markets?
It's definitely on a lot of people's bucket lists.
Totally.
Yeah.
But they made a good point about how knowing German can, like, really transform your travel experience.
Okay, so like, yeah, obviously you can get by with English in a lot of touristy areas, but imagine being able to like actually talk to people, like the locals.
Right, like being able to go off the beaten path and, like, actually understand what's going on.
Yeah, like imagine trying to navigate those like small town festivals they have, or like even just ordering food at a restaurant that's not like super touristy.
Right, or, like, asking for directions, like, really being able to immerse yourself in the culture.
Yeah, it's like the difference between looking at a postcard and actually being there.
Exactly. And then they got into, like, the whole cultural heritage thing, which, I mean, you can't really talk about Germany without talking about that.
Right, like they have such a rich history of like literature, music, philosophy.
It's incredible. Like Goethe, Nietzsche, Beethoven. I mean, come on.
Yeah, those are like some serious heavy hitters. And the podcast argued that like you're really missing out if you only experience their work in translation.
Right, like they were saying, it's like looking at a painting through like a dirty window.
You're not getting the full picture.
And don't forget about film. Like German cinema is amazing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like Run Lola Run, Goodbye Lenin, The Lives of Others. I mean, there's so much good stuff out there.
And it gives you such a different perspective on things than like Hollywood movies, you know?
Totally. It's like a window into another culture's way of seeing the world.
Okay, so then they address like the elephant in the room, which is that a lot of people think German is really hard to learn.
Ah, yes, the infamous difficulty myth.
So what do they have to say about that?
Well, they didn't sugarcoat it. They acknowledged that, yeah, there are some challenging aspects to German grammar, like the cases, with all the different endings for nouns and articles.
Right, like dirty dus.
Yeah.
Like, what's all that about?
But they also pointed out that a lot of it is just about getting used to a different way of thinking about language.
Okay, that makes sense.
And they emphasized that German is a very logical language with consistent pronunciation rules.
So it's not like French where like half the letters are silent.
Right. And they said that it actually has a lot of similarities with English, too, especially in terms of vocabulary.
Oh yeah, like Hauswasser is water.
Exactly. So it's not like starting from scratch.
So they basically made the case that like, yeah, it's a challenge, but it's not impossible.
And I think that's a really important message because a lot of people get discouraged before they even start.
Exactly. And they had some good advice about like finding a learning method that works for you. Like some people like apps, some people prefer classes.
Yeah, it's all about finding what keeps you motivated and engaged.
And they also said that consistency is key. Like even if you can only spare a few minutes each day, like learning a few new words or listening to a German podcast,
It all adds up over time.
small steps, big results. Okay, so to recap, we've talked about how learning German can like seriously boost your career prospects, give you access to amazing education opportunities, make travel way more fulfilling, and connect you with this rich culture.
And hopefully we've busted some myths about German being impossible to learn.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure, but it's a rewarding one. And, when you think about it, it's not just about learning a language. It's about expanding your worldview.
Absolutely. It's like opening a door to a whole new way of thinking and experiencing the world.
I love that. And they had this one piece of advice that I thought was really cool, which is to like find what excites you most about German culture.
Yeah.
And use that as your motivation.
Yeah, like if you're obsessed with German cars or, you love German techno music, like let that be your guide.
It's like finding your personal connection to the language.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe one day you'll be fluent enough to come on the show and tell us all about it.
I would love that. So if you're out there and you're thinking about learning German, I say go for it.
Yeah.
You won't regret it.
It's an adventure waiting to happen.
All right, and that's our deep dive for today. Thanks for listening.
Tschüss.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Oh, you're getting good.
I'm trying.